We're in the middle of the desert with like cartels, who knows where, and you just flip the fucking car. We started doing testing with our Oxnard, California office, right? So we were naturally better at a lot of the infotainment stuff because we were based where we were based, and they were based in California, so it made it a lot easier to go into Mexico. So the rule was when we were doing prototype development and testing in Mexico was we were not allowed to stop for any circumstances whatsoever, ever. We had Armored 7 series, which by the way were made in Mexico as well. That's where they made the Armored 7s. We were trained on the cars of how to operate things, like how to make the windshield explode out if you had to, and things like that. That's essentially if all the doors are blocked, you get blocked into the car, you have an exit point. That's why they have the exploding windshields. And these cars would have fuel cells in the cars, and they would have about 1,000-mile range. It was a good time. It was also very, very dangerous time at the same time. There was no stopping at 7-Eleven, if you know what I mean. So we'd go basically start in California, straight shot. So envision a car full of laptops. So one guy driving, 3 guys in the car, or girls or whatever, doing different diagnostics of the car live with laptops. In some cases to the extreme of sending software over the internet to Germany. They would make some changes because we were doing more validation than coding necessarily. They'd send it back, and we'd actually formulated a method to flash the cars while moving. You could only imagine what would happen if somebody would accidentally flash the wrong module, and now you got stuck with the car in a very bad place, right? So that never happened, thank God, but that could have happened. That was always on our minds, but that's essentially what it would be. Very tough days, because even that was against policies. They could only drive 6 hours a day, I think. I think that's what it was. So we were trying to get the heat conditions. We were always working in conjunction with different suppliers. So Navtech would be there. Google in one instance was there with us. So these people would actually be there with you. So that's the idea. So some of it was digitizing roads. Some of it was validating things like satellite radio, because that's still technically available in Mexico as well and in Canada, right? So things like that, and also seeing how the different components would handle the heat. And the high stress condition that we created by not stopping for all that time was also a very interesting use case, right? So you're not stopping for longer than the car can hold fuel because you have this tank in the trunk, this additional tank of fuel. Those scenarios would never happen in the real world, but we were able to create those scenarios. So we had an instance where we were going through the desert, and we were basically that. So that day we were focusing more on navigation, and we're driving through the desert. And we come off the main road because we're essentially following the lead car. We came off the main road. And we were driving, and what ends up happening in the desert, especially if there's like not a lot going on where no one's really doing much with it, it's different. It's not like the desert in like the Middle East. There's more dirt and stuff. So what ends up happening is you get like these hills on the side of the road, very similar to snow. So we were driving, and one of the guys got a little bit too close to the edge, and he straight up flipped the car in the middle of Mexico. Yeah, the car just rolls over. So he just caught the berm and we saw it. I mean, they were like maybe, we weren't right on top of each other, but we could see him. It was within viewing distance. And he just flipped the car over. And it was funny. This guy was like a typical German engineer. He's freaking out about his laptop and his data. He's going to lose all this shit. And it's like, bro, we're in the middle of the desert with like cartels, who knows where, and you just flipped the fucking car. Like, what do we do? We left it. We left the car. Somebody went and got it later, but we just basically took him out and we left. We just left it like that, and there was a lot of explaining to do, as you can imagine. We weren't some little shop, some little performance shop, right, doing stuff. This was for a corporate company, so something like that happens, it's a big deal. Here's the thing, right? So whatever happened, everybody saw, right? And everything is in data loggers, more so than it would be anyway in a car. So we used to call them, they're called the Blue Pirate. These are the data loggers that BMW would use. So it's an additional layer of data logging, right? There's no hiding what you did. So it's not like he wasn't doing anything wrong. I'm sure if he was speeding and, doing donuts or something and flipped the car, it'd be different. But obviously it wasn't his fault. So plus, honestly, even if it was, there's a bunch of engineers on site. If something had to be deleted, I'm sure people would have done it to save the guy's job, right? But it was nothing that you could really blame the guy for. This was like a thing that you'd plan. You'd plan this for like a month to make sure everything was in place. Everybody knew exactly what they had to do when they had to do it, because you want to optimize the time as much as possible. Plus, you have external staff you're paying, right? You have security with you and things like that. So they need to know what we're going to do, because it's this whole thing. We never had an incident when I was there. Like nothing weird ever happened. And if you think about it, this was at the time where there was like there was a freaking cartel war going on, right? And you have 10 sometimes very expensive cars going through the desert looking very bad, looking like a caravan of who knows, maybe other drug dealers. For all you know, right? So you're this huge target. And I mean, anything could have happened, right? Besides somebody like blocking the road. I mean, they have rocket launchers, right? Like stuff, thinking back now, because I was younger then, all kinds of wild shit could have happened, right? At the time, you had options. So you can get a air suspension car, or you can get a steel suspension car. So a little tidbit here is something that's interesting to know. If someone happens to have a 760 from those years, right, that is not air suspension, it's probably armored because you couldn't get it with air suspension. You only could get it with normal coils. And you couldn't get a 760 without air suspension. They were heavier, so they did things to compensate for them, but just, acceleration went down significantly, right? They still handled just as well because of the modifications of the suspension, but they were definitely slower cars. But once you got moving, you're chugging away doing 130 miles an hour in Mexico, no problems. So Brazil was a similar situation as Mexico. And I think the reason why we got to do Brazil was because we showed that we could do that, right? So at one point, BMW actually came up with this deal with the Brazilian government that we as a car company, alongside, I believe it was Navtech at the time, would digitize the roads. So what we got out of it was we got good maps for our cars, but the data would be made available to everyone. As far as anything was concerned, we were working directly with the government of Brazil on this, which is pretty amazing. So we had all of their support. So we flew them in into Brazil. We had our own security team, so machine guns, everything you can imagine, because we needed it, frankly. Brazil it's a beautiful place, it's a dangerous place, and we were there at the worst time. Formula One was going on. So not gonna lie, it was definitely a good time, but no one was going anywhere by themselves because we were targets to get kidnapped or who knows what else. That was essentially Brazil. We digitized the whole country. It was an interesting way to see the country, right? And it's something that I will always hold under my belt, saying that I help with that, which is kind of cool. But there was just a lot of weird stuff going on in Brazil, if you know what I mean, right? So the fact that the government basically wanted us to come in and they struck up this deal with the government, and there was a lot of government support when we were there, like military and things like that. It didn't seem like I was going to work that day. Realized my normal environment was in a test lab, in an office or whatever, right? Next thing you know, we're staying in the jungle overnight in the middle of Brazil with security guards and stuff. It was definitely an out-of-body experience, I'd say. Something you don't get to experience in a normal day. We did all the main roads, so all the major roads that people would drive on. And then there was a secondary team that came in through Navtech that had those cars that had the big things on top. So we basically formed the basis, and then they came in and did all the other stuff. That's those. You ever see cars that have the big dome on top? That's what those are. So it's just the 3D maps. So that's what you see, the 3D maps, but it's also doing the visualization of the roads and stuff. So we did the major stuff, and then there was an additional team that came in and filled in the rest. So we were in a ground in Brazil for 2 weeks, and we had armored sevens. The security we had with the machine guns, they had Range Rover Sports. It was like a movie. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It felt like if I had two bad cell phones weren't as popular back, that probably would have got fired. Like videotaping that kind of stuff, it was definitely different.